Charles Haskell from Lloyds Register. And I don't know if any of you have been involved in some of the Lloyds Register sessions, but you know, there's occasionally you have the good fortune to be invited along to something which really sort of stretches your mind. And the work that Lloyds Register have been doing in this space, I think, is absolutely brilliant. But Charles is also going to sort of pick out some of the things that might also get in the way of our journey towards a zero carbon future and quite literally saving the planet. Really interested to hear what you're going to say, not least because I know all the excellent work that Lloyds Register and effort and thought that Lloyds Register have been putting into this, or LR. I'm never quite sure it's Lloyds Register or LR these days. But please, over to you.
Yeah, first, my focus is purely on decarbonisation, moving to zero carbon fuels. How are we going to do that? Working backwards from 2050. But what Grant has just said as well is instrumental as the first steps now. And I couldn't sort of agree with any more than you said, that there's so many things we can do today that we're not doing because the system isn't worked out for that. There's many energy efficiency technologies which can come out today to make those quick wins. We need those. We need them to mature to get more savings, so we're using less fuel in the future. So where I'm looking at it in from a right, we need fuel demand is going to be fuel supply is going to be the biggest issue. Therefore, if we can use less of it, we're going to transition quicker. The other part, which I don't think was touched on, or I'm not so sure of all the technicalities, but we still have sell fast halfway around the world, turn around because I've got a better price elsewhere, and then sell the other half of the world, and maybe even put your cargo where you picked it up from. So there's many things which can be done today. But the way we've approached it is we're basically trying to, and our mission statement from the Maritime Decarbonisation Hub is to remove the barriers to accelerate the safe and sustainable decarbonisation of the maritime energy transition. And the way we've done that is we've looked across the whole supply chain, and shipping's termed a lot as hard to abate. I'd say it's multifaceted. We're very reliant on many pieces coming together. The ship itself is relatively easy. We can build the ships. The ports can store the fuels. The fuels are already being stored for industrial purposes, etc. They're already being shipped around the world. Okay, we've got bunkering, we've got safety. It's a production of the fuels and creating that demand and that signal. So that's where I see the key challenge and how it fits into today's conversation as well. Geopolitics, how does it support it, and moving forwards. In terms of Ukraine and how that fits in many ways, yeah, it's an energy security. And what we've seen predominantly, we saw a rapid shift. And I think shipping has a huge part to sort of play in keeping everything moving. Europe had a huge reliance on Russia for gas. What did we see? We saw FSRUs being adopted into Germany very quickly. That's the shipping industry actually being very agile. It's often criticized for being slow moving, very agile, getting things moving. Otherwise, we would have seen huge industrial sectors in Germany closing. But what it's also done is focused, right, where is our energy security? And as we work backwards from 2050, we're already seeing the exponential growth in renewables. So in the last 5 years, or in the next 5 years, we're going to double what's happened over the past 20 years in terms of wind and solar. So countries are going to become less reliant. So today we've got 10%, or less than 10% of the world exporting energy to the other 80%. But potentially we see 80% then being self-reliant. And that will change the production of fuels, where we're going to move them. But we still have that demand of where is shipping going to get its fuel from. And I think we need to look at that exponential. The way we're looking at the moment is business as usual, what's happening today. But there are changes, and we need to look at that exponential. So put other things into perspective. 2020, which only seems like yesterday, 7% of the world had access to internet. Now you've got 50% of the world. USB sticks came out 20 years ago, they're already defunct. We've had rapid evolution. If you look at COVID really did show what was possible when the human mind sets itself to the right challenge. So what we haven't really talked about today is the climate emergency, and what Ukraine has done is detracted a lot from that, and we've had a very damp summer here in UK, so it's also moved away. But the cost of doing nothing is going to be very significant, and the cost of shipping doing nothing could harm itself in terms of access to finance. We talked about ESG, but where are we going to get the finance in shipping if banks aren't loaning, if they're not seen as green investments. And then the other side, the charterers, the end cargo units, what are people's perception? So that's going to feed through. But the shipping is a very small piece of their carbon price at the moment in terms of for the customers. So there are challenges there moving forwards. But I think it's important to focus backwards from 2050 as well. Look at what do we need to do to get there. But that exponential growth of what we're seeing in renewables, what we're seeing in electrolyzer capacity today is crucial, and that's something which we're looking at very much outside of the maritime industry, where we're moving on the energy and supply sector. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to be multifaceted, multi-fueled, but the multi-fuel then gives us a greater resilience to the supply chain, I think will be one of the positive parts. But it's not going to be easy. But I think all the sectors really have to come together, because if we can't get the contractual clauses right, it's not going to work. This energy transition is also very different. If we go back and we look at wind to coal, which I think when the first BIMCO contracts were really coming out and still structured on, and coal to wind, we moved to a fuel which was safer, more easy to store, more energy dense, and more importantly, it was available and it was cheap. And if we look at this energy transition, none of those 5 cases exist. So we've got to take each one in purpose and say, right, how do we de-risk? How do we de-risk the safety? That's primarily what we're working on very much in Lloyds Register at the moment. But how do we de-risk the availability and the price? And those are the biggest challenges, availability and price.
Thanks. I mean, I suppose I'm interested really, because you guys are on the, very aware of the new technologies that are coming in. Do you actually see now the money starting to flow into these new technologies which are necessary to affect the transition? Is that starting to happen? We're beginning to see it flow. We're beginning to see a lot of adventurous ship owners making more gambles and investing in more. There was a huge push for the IMO to come out with a stronger strategy. They've done that, but we need to see that really written into hard policies to probably allow that investment. So the way we're looking at it across the supply chain is looking at technology readiness, investment readiness, and community readiness. So, and the 3 of those tie in together. If you have a strong investment case, that leads to technology advancement. IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act in America, is really driving things. We're seeing a lot of companies shifting their research centers over to America to take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act. That is also part of a supply chain, though. The Inflation Reduction Act is to build up technologies in America away from China, because at the moment, where we've seen over the past 10 years, all the advances in renewable capacity and electrolyzer capacity and the growth is all coming from China. So it comes back to supply chain. Where could we be really, where could we have a real supply chain shock is China. If they stop exporting electrolyzers or keeping that in-house, there's greater power shift there. So we're seeing a lot more shift there, but more needs, we're hoping that, with stronger policy through community readiness will allow more de-risking on the investment readiness into technology. But there's also technology could provide a step change. So if we have a strong technology coming out, which could then actually drive a new policy. So what I didn't discuss earlier when we were talking about renewables, and we were talking about solar and wind, and where solar and wind is predominant is those energy producing countries today. Middle East, Australia, they've all got high solar potential. It can lead to a lower cost of hydrogen per kilogram. But we haven't factored in nuclear and how scalable nuclear could become as well. And that's a very interesting part of, could it be a disruptor? Could it be a disruptor to supply chains? Could you see nuclear-powered FPSOs coming out and being rolled out across the globe? Could disrupt everything. And that's an interesting part as well.